All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be diving deep into, into this idea of all-natural eating.
Okay.
And to do that, we're going to be looking at this pretty popular fitness influencer's week-long experiment that he documented on his YouTube channel.
Interesting.
Basically, he decided to completely swap out like all his usual protein shakes and supplements and all that stuff for just like single ingredient foods, the kind of stuff that's naturally found on Earth, no processing, just straight from nature.
So like a back to basics approach.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he even calls it eating like our ancestors in the video.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
It is, right. And you actually see him run into obstacles like right away, like in the grocery store.
Oh, really? Like what kind of obstacles?
Well, for one thing, he's having a real tough time finding snacks that fit his rules. You know, no processed ingredients, just single ingredient stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the snack aisle is pretty much the opposite of all natural.
Right. He even jokes about how expensive, like, Garden of Eden steak is, emphasizing how pricey it can get to eat this way.
Yeah, that's a good point. It definitely raises the question of whether this kind of diet is even accessible for most people.
Exactly. And it kind of makes you wonder if, our reliance on processed food is almost by design. Like, it's just so much easier and cheaper to grab a bag of chips than to, like, whip up a salad from scratch,
Yeah, definitely. But I'm curious about this whole all-natural thing, too. I mean, it seems kind of ambiguous.
Oh, totally. And he actually gets into that in the video, too.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, like he defines it as single ingredient foods, which sounds straightforward enough.
Right.
But then you start to think about it, and it gets kind of fuzzy. Like, what about cooking? Does that make something not natural anymore? Or what about, like, grinding grains into flour? Is that still considered natural?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Where do you draw the line?
Exactly. And the video kind of highlights how subjective it all is. Like, there's this one part where he's walking down the snack aisle, and he finds, like, a whole section labeled all natural. But then when he flips over a bag and reads the ingredients, it's like a mile long. And there's all this stuff like maltodextrin and citric acid.
Oh, wow. So not exactly what you picture when you think straight from nature.
Right. And it's kind of funny, but it also makes you realize that the term all natural can be super misleading.
It definitely seems like there's a lot of gray area there.
For sure. And on top of the whole definition thing, there's also the cost barrier to consider, like I mentioned before.
Yeah, the Garden of Eden steak.
Exactly. He spends a ton of money on steak and produce, which makes you wonder if this way of eating is really sustainable for the average person.
That's a valid point. You shouldn't have to break the bank to eat healthy.
Right. And then there's the whole snack struggle. He's constantly trying to come up with snacks that fit his rules, and it pushes him to get pretty creative in the kitchen. Like, he even makes these baked almond butter banana boats.
Almond butter banana boats. That sounds kind of interesting, actually.
They actually look pretty good.
Yeah.
But even with these homemade options, he realizes that all natural doesn't automatically mean low calorie.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not a magic weight loss solution.
Nope. Like with that almond butter banana boat, he jokes that there's enough almond butter in there to seduce a Great Dane.
Okay, that's a pretty vivid image.
Right. So it's a good reminder that just because something is natural doesn't mean you can eat a ton of it and expect to lose weight.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Calories are still calories no matter where they come from.
Totally. Another thing that really stood out to me is how he calls out the restaurant industry. Like, he talks about how even places that try to offer healthy options often sneak in a bunch of processed ingredients.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like he makes this joke about needing an SOS call if anyone ever sees him ordering plain chicken breast and veggies at a restaurant.
Well, that's great funny.
I know, right? But it also highlights how tricky it can be to avoid processed food when you're eating out.
It's almost like it's unavoidable sometimes.
Yeah, and it even gets to the point where he's buying fruit at a gas station because it's cheaper than at the grocery store. So clearly this all-natural thing isn't as straightforward as it might seem.
Not at all. It seems like there are a lot of challenges and nuances that you might not expect.
Totally. And it makes you wonder if this whole approach is even realistic in the long run.
Oh.
But before we get into that, let's actually talk about this Blue Zones connection he keeps bringing up.
Oh, yeah, the blue zones. I'm curious to hear more about that.
So he specifically mentions Okinawa, Japan, which is known for having a ton of people who live to be over 100 years old.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is, right. And he actually tries to incorporate some of their practices into his challenge. Like, he tries out Hara Hachibu, which is their tradition of eating until you're 80% full.
Interesting. I've heard of that. It's all about mindful eating, right?
Exactly. And he seems particularly fascinated by their nickname for the Japanese sweet potato, the potato of immortality.
The potato of immortality. That's a pretty powerful name.
Right. And it's a staple in their diet, so he makes sure to include it in his meals, too.
I wonder if there's actually any scientific evidence to support the idea that certain foods can promote longevity.
That's a good question. I'm not sure if there's a direct link, but it's interesting to think about how diet might play a role in overall health and lifespan.
Definitely. It makes you wonder if there are any aspects of the Blue Zone's lifestyle that we could realistically adopt into our own lives, even if we can't completely replicate their environment and culture.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, maybe we can't all move to Okinawa and start farming sweet potatoes.
Right.
But maybe there are smaller changes we can make, like being more mindful of our portion sizes or incorporating more whole foods into our diets.
Exactly. It's all about finding those little things that can make a big difference in the long run.
Exactly. And, even though this whole experiment might seem kind of extreme, it does make you think about what it really means to eat healthy and how our food choices can impact our overall well-being.
Absolutely. It's definitely food for thought. No pun intended.
Yeah, I see what you did there. But anyway, while we're on the topic of well-being, let's actually move on to the physical and mental impacts he experienced throughout this whole all-natural week.
Okay, yeah. I'm curious to hear about that. Because he doesn't exactly make it look easy in the video.
He definitely doesn't sugarcoat it. Right from the start, he talks about feeling super hungry, like all the time.
Yeah, I can imagine that, especially if he's used to eating a lot of processed foods, which tend to be less filling.
Right, and he also mentions having limited snack options, which probably didn't help. And overall, he just seems kind of miserable. He's really feeling the deprivation.
It sounds like he's going through some kind of withdrawal, almost.
That's actually a really good point because he does describe feeling like he's on a sugar detox, which a lot of people say feels like actual withdrawal.
Oh, wow. So it's not just in his head, it's a real physiological response.
Yeah, and it makes sense when you think about it. Like when you cut out processed foods, you're basically eliminating a lot of added sugars, which can have a pretty addictive effect on the brain.
Definitely. It's like anything else that triggers those reward pathways. Your body gets used to it, and then when you take it away, it rebels.
Exactly. And he definitely doesn't hold back when describing how bad it feels. Like, there's this one part where he's desperately searching for snacks online.
Oh.
And he's like, if I want milk, I guess I'll have to go find a cow and milk it myself. And then he jokes that if he wants nut milk, he'll have to bust a nut.
Oh my gosh.
I know, right? It's hilarious, but it also shows how desperate he is for something, anything, to satisfy his cravings.
And it's a good reminder that those cravings are real and powerful, especially when you're making a drastic change to your diet.
Totally. But despite all that initial struggle, he does start to report some positive changes as the week goes on.
Oh, really? Like what kind of changes?
Well, he says his digestion improves significantly. He feels less bloated and just lighter overall.
That makes sense. If he's eating mostly whole foods, his body's probably processing everything more efficiently.
Yeah, that's what he figures too. And he also says he feels much lighter during his workouts, like he has more energy and stamina.
Interesting. So it's like he's actually performing better.
Yeah. He even compares his well-fueled body to a Ferrari running on premium gas.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Right. And here's the really interesting part. He also notices that his skin starts to clear up. Like he has this condition called keratosis pilaris, which causes these little red bumps on his skin.
I've heard of that. It's pretty common, actually.
Yeah. And he says that the redness starts to fade significantly after a few days of eating all natural.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. It makes you wonder if there's a connection between eliminating processed foods and improving skin health.
Right. It's definitely something to think about. And on top of the physical changes, he also talks about feeling mentally sharper and having way more stable energy levels throughout the day.
So no more afternoon slumps or brain fog.
Apparently not. It's like all those nutrient-dense whole foods are actually making a difference in how he feels, both physically and mentally.
That makes sense. If you're giving your body the nutrients it needs, it's going to function better overall.
Exactly. And the craziest part is that he even says his cravings for sweet things start to decrease, especially after that initial sugar withdrawal phase.
Wow, so it's like his taste buds have reset.
It seems like it. He talks about how he's able to appreciate the natural sweetness of whole foods more now that he's not constantly bombarding his palate with artificial sweeteners and processed sugars.
That's pretty fascinating. It's like he's rediscovering the true flavors of food.
Exactly. But even with all these positive changes, there comes a point where he hits a wall and the reality of this all-natural lifestyle sets in.
Oh, I bet. It can't be easy to maintain that level of strictness all the time.
Definitely not.
Uh,
And that brings us to a really important turning point in his journey, the moment he realizes that this way of eating isn't always practical or enjoyable.
yeah, that sounds like a crucial moment. It's one thing to do a week-long challenge, but it's another thing entirely to make it a permanent lifestyle change.
For sure. And that's exactly what we're going to be exploring in the next part of our deep dive. We'll see how he navigates these challenges and what he ultimately takes away from the whole experience.
I'm really interested to hear how it all plays out. It seems like he's learned a lot already.
He definitely has. And I think there are some valuable lessons here for all of us, even if we're not planning on adopting an entirely all-natural diet.
I agree. There's always something to be gained from exploring different approaches to health and wellness.
Absolutely. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back after the break to continue our deep dive into the world of all-natural eating.
And we're back. So before the break, we were talking about how our fitness influencer was starting to experience the not-so-glamorous side of this all-natural eating challenge.
Yeah, it seems like the initial excitement was starting to wear off a bit as he hit those real-world challenges.
Totally. Like, it's one thing to have this idealistic vision of eating straight from nature.
Right.
But then you actually have to, live it, and it's not always pretty. Exactly. And that's where the whole sustainability question comes in. Like, how do you maintain that level of strictness day in and day out, especially in a world that's so heavily geared towards processed foods?
It's a tough one for sure. And in the video, you can see him starting to grapple with that. Like, he even admits that he can't really imagine sticking to this extreme version of all natural forever.
Oh, really? So he's kind of hitting a wall.
Yeah, kind of. But here's the interesting thing. He doesn't completely throw in the towel. He actually seems to embrace the struggle.
What do you mean?
Well, he talks about how even though he might not be able to maintain this level of strictness long term, the experience has been super valuable in terms of raising his awareness.
Ah, I see. So it's more about the journey than the destination.
Exactly. Like, he's realized just how many processed ingredients he was consuming without even realizing it before.
That's a good point. It's easy to become complacent when you're not paying close attention to what you're putting in your body.
Totally. And he actually does this really interesting comparison in the video. He shows his typical breakfast side by side with his all-natural breakfast.
Oh, I'm curious to hear about this. What did he usually eat?
So his go-to breakfast was this thing he calls a protein sludge bowl, which sounds kind of gross, but I guess it was pretty tasty.
Oh, okay.
And calorie-wise, it was around 400 calories.
All right, so not too bad.
No, not terrible.
Yeah.
But then his all-natural breakfast, which was packed with ground beef, veggies, and sweet potato, came in at almost 800 calories.
Wait, really? That's double the calorie.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It seems counterintuitive that the healthier option would be so much higher in calories.
It definitely goes against the whole calories in, calories out mentality.
Totally. But he explains that it's not just about the calories, it's also about the nutrients.
Right. The quality of the calories matters.
Exactly. The all-natural breakfast, despite being higher in calories, was way richer in things like fiber and healthy fats, which help you feel fuller for longer.
Ah, that makes sense. So he was probably less likely to snack throughout the morning and end up consuming even more calories in the long run.
That's what he figures too. And it kind of highlights how focusing on nutrient-dense foods can be a more sustainable approach to healthy eating than just restricting calories.
Definitely. It's about nourishing your body, not just depriving it.
Exactly. And speaking of nourishment, there's another really cool aspect to his experience. He mentions that because he and his wife are both eating the same types of food now, they've started cooking and enjoying meals together more often.
Oh, that's so sweet. So this dietary restriction has actually brought them closer.
It seems like it. It kind of shows how food can be a really powerful connector, you know?
Absolutely. Shared meals are such an important part of building relationships and creating memories.
Totally. And it's a good reminder that healthy eating doesn't have to be a solo mission. It can be a way to connect with others and enjoy the process together.
Exactly. It's about finding joy in the journey, not just focusing on the end goal.
And speaking of the journey, as the week goes on, you can see our influencer starting to shift his perspective. Like, he's still committed to reducing his intake of processed foods.
Okay.
But he's also realizing that strict adherence to the all-natural rules isn't realistic or sustainable in the long run.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's all about finding a balance that works for you.
Exactly. So instead of viewing it as an all-or-nothing thing, he's looking for more flexible ways to incorporate these principles into his everyday life.
So it's more about making gradual changes and finding what works best for him in the long run?
Exactly. Like, he starts prioritizing whole food options whenever possible.
Okay.
and he's just generally more conscious of what he's putting in his body.
That sounds like a really healthy and sustainable approach.
Right. It's not about being perfect. It's about making progress.
And it's about recognizing that food is meant to be enjoyed, not just endured.
Totally. And he also makes this really important point about how true health isn't just about achieving a certain physique.
Oh, I like that. It's about so much more than just how you look.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He talks about how it's also about feeling good mentally and physically, having the energy to do the things you love, and having a positive relationship with food.
It's a much more holistic perspective.
Absolutely. And it seems like that's what he's really starting to embrace. So while he set out to explore this world of all-natural eating, he's discovering so much more about the complexities of health and well-being in the process.
It sounds like he's really on the right track. And his journey is a great reminder that we're all constantly learning and evolving when it comes to our health.
Totally. And I think there's some really valuable takeaways here for all of us, no matter where we are on our own health journeys.
I agree. It's all about finding what works best for you and making those small, sustainable changes that can lead to big results over time.
Exactly. So in the last part of our deep dive, we'll be exploring some of those key takeaways in more detail and talking about how you can apply them to your own life, even if you're not planning on going completely all natural.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to wrapping up this discussion and sharing some practical tips that our listeners can implement right away.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into this whole all-natural eating experiment.
Yeah, it's been a pretty wild ride, hasn't it? From those pricey Garden of Eden steaks to... I mean, who knew dog food could look so appetizing?
Seriously. But jokes aside, I think there's actually a lot we can learn from this guy's experience, even if we're not all about to ditch processed food entirely.
Definitely. I think one of the biggest takeaways is the importance of just being more aware of what's actually in our food.
Like, he went into this thinking he was already eating pretty healthy, but then when he actually started reading labels and breaking things down, he was kind of shocked.
Yeah, it's easy to fall into that trap of just assuming something is healthy because it's marketed that way.
Totally. But, even beyond just awareness, he also has experienced some pretty tangible benefits from eating all natural for a week. Like, his digestion improved, he had more energy, and even his skin cleared up.
Right. And I think that speaks to the idea that food is more than just fuel. It really does impact our bodies in a lot of different ways.
It's like what we eat is literally providing the building blocks for everything that happens inside us.
Exactly. And I think that's why focusing on nutrient-dense foods is so important. It's not just about counting calories. It's about giving our bodies the good stuff they need to thrive.
Totally. And it makes me think about those blue zones again.
Oh, yeah, those places where people seem to just live forever.
Exactly. And while we might not all be able to adopt their entire lifestyle,
Right.
there are definitely some principles we can borrow, like prioritizing whole foods and being more mindful about portion sizes.
Absolutely. It's not about following a rigid diet. It's about making choices that support our overall well-being.
And let's not forget the social aspect of food, too. Like, it was really cool to see how this challenge actually led to more quality time between our influencer and his wife.
It's a great reminder that healthy eating doesn't have to be a solitary thing. It can actually be a way to connect with others and enjoy the process together.
For sure. But I think the biggest lesson here is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to healthy eating.
It's about finding what works for you and your lifestyle.
Exactly. And our influencer eventually realized that sticking to a strictly all-natural diet long-term just wasn't realistic for him.
It's all about finding that balance, right?
Exactly. Like, he had to find a way to incorporate those healthier principles into his routine without feeling completely restricted or deprived.
It's about making sustainable changes that you can actually stick with.
Totally. And ultimately, I think that's what it's all about, finding a way of eating that makes you feel good, both physically and mentally.
He really seemed to land on a more holistic view of health, right? It wasn't just about how he looked, it was about how he felt overall.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important message for all of us to remember. It's not about striving for perfection. It's about making choices that support our overall well-being.
And that can look different for everyone.
Exactly. But I think we can all agree that being more mindful of what we eat and prioritizing nutrient-rich foods is a pretty good place to start.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up here, I want to leave you with one final question to think about.
Okay, hit me.
Could cutting back on certain processed foods actually enhance your enjoyment of other foods? Like, would you savor a piece of fruit more if you weren't constantly bombarding your taste buds with sugary snacks?
That's a really interesting question. It makes you think about how our food choices can impact our whole experience of eating.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, by simplifying our diets and focusing on those whole, natural flavors, we can actually rediscover the true joy of food.
I love that. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We hope you learned a thing or two and maybe even feel inspired to explore your own relationship with food a little deeper.
And who knows, maybe you'll even find yourself craving a potato of immortality or two.
Thanks for listening.